Well, you know what judgment is. Do you understand what the idea of judgment is?
For me, it means prejudice or prejudgment.
Well, you know, it's really choosing what you prefer. You choose what you prefer and let everyone else have the right to live the way they want to, knowing that the way they live has nothing to do with the way you choose to live. It will not affect you if it is not what you prefer. Preference is not judgment. Judgment is invalidating everything you don't prefer. When you invalidate something, you become equal to it, and thus what you do not want, you become. Okay? And then that's really what's behind the phrase, judge not and ye shall not be judged.
Right.
Okay? It means that essentially you become what you hate. So,
haven't you seen that happen to people and institutions? And isn't that an interesting paradox of
people are
human
culturally
dynamics?
conditioned to it. I mean, if you go into the educational system, which is another entire issue on a cultural level, you'll see all the little ego games and all the stuff that children are encouraged to play. And you know, it's no wonder that some people have a hard time in this kind of system, which is entirely an artificially and synthetically created disaster for trying to evolve in the system. And that's why from another interesting and rather amusing aspect, is so desirable, because it puts out so much challenge.
Well, you seem to be suggesting that the quality of one's actions in a political or social arena, or any arena for that matter, is really determined by internal factors, and that would make it, would seem to me, impossible to judge the actions of anyone else, even a Stalin or a Hitler.
I think it's pretty tricky business. I think you can make judgments about actions, that you don't judge beings, you judge their actions. And actions are good or evil in the sense that actions increase paranoia and separateness, or they increase unity. So you can judge actions and you can be opposed. I can say, I don't agree with that action you're going to do, and in fact I'm going to stop you from doing the action. But as Kabir said, do what you do with another human being, but never put them out of your heart. That if I have to harden my heart in order to oppose you, I lost. We both lost. And that's part of the art of the inner and the outer dialogue.
Well, it turns out, with a bit of research, that the long-eared ancestors were supposedly a group of magician-builder gods called the, and you've got to do this with a knob movement, the Maoriko Haurongorongo. Because you've got to gesticulate with the right language. If you're Arabic, you'd be doing a finger. So, very important. And Maoriko Haurongorongo literally means the master of special knowledge. And it is claimed by the Easter Islanders that these were the people that were responsible for raising these beautiful Moai statues. And according to the oral tradition of Easter Island, they supposedly moved these enormous statues with something called mana, which is a kind of psychic force where matter yields to the focused intent of a master of the subtle arts. And legend states that, and again I quote, by words of their mouths, the statues were commanded to walk through the air. And you may think this is quite unusual. The same story pops up in the Andes, because here we have a group of megalithic monument builders called the Huari. And they were described as a race of tall, white-skinned giants, sometimes with red hair, the most celebrated of whom was a big guy called Viracocha. And he was described as a builder god who, together with 7 shining ones, goes about building temple complexes up and down the Andes, literally overnight, using vocal commands that made the stones fly through the air. And afterwards, they were said to just basically set out to other lands to promulgate the knowledge throughout the Andes. Same story in Central America. We have the Pyramid of Uxmal in Yucatan, again raised by a tall magician by commands of his mouth.
They knew all about anti-gravity. Those stone blocks weren't lifted by slaves. Can you imagine hundreds of slaves in the desert trying to roll those big blocks over fallen trees on sand? Impossible. How did they lift 70 tons up into the tops and halfway up the pyramids and put the tops on? They say they built platforms all the way up. There were slaves dragging these things all up to the top. You get so many slaves in a small little platform that's built probably out of sand or whatever, and trying to let them to drag a 70-ton block behind them. Impossible. They had the secrets of anti-gravity. And other writings you see, they had these priests, they had some sort of a thing in their hand and they'd tap the blocks and the box would float. And they'd tap it again and it'd float again. And they had instruments that gave you these secrets and that anti-gravity. It's always been right through history. And I think there's been a small group right through history, known history, it's been handed down.
I have a question about me and my partner. Maybe if you can talk about our relationship and yeah.
What's his name?
I don't really have a specific question. His name is Gareth.
Jareth. All right, just give me a second here. The last lifetime you spent with him was in the Roman Navy. You were invading Cyprus. This was a really bloody battle. You were both on the Roman Navy side by Admiral Quintus Curtius, which is a sacred geometry crest name, which you've both been brought in. You were both ship captains. Both ship captains landed on the Isle of Crete. 20,000 troops invaded the island, and they began taking over sacred geometry structures there, and then they captured an underground chamber there. So both of you are part of a expeditionary force to capture sacred geometry buildings and temples and underground technology. So why are you together now? You're both explorers, both got pulled into the exploration net, both were part of the Malaysian expression into the secret tables where the gold was. We go back, skip Ponce, third timeline session, fourth paradox. He's a time traveler. Knights of Malta, really, really big within him. Knights of Columbus, really, really big in his family lineage. Well, how do you relate with him? Multiple divinity path births. Both male and female. You got a lot of information here. I actually got to turn the skill up here for a second here. Process this. All right, here we go. 1883. This is the lifetime why you are with him now. The lifetime that brought you together is this Roman expression where you invaded Crete and you found an underground cavern, and inside that underground cavern were actually UFO vessels that were unmanned in non-working order, like hundreds of them, like a repair facility that had been abandoned. And this was a massive awakening for your soul. And many of the Roman troops and those that were invaded this island, invaded Crete, and then began to be aware of what's down there, went through massive awakenings themselves. And then there was this big backstabbing where assassination groups came in and just killed everyone that saw the truth of what was down there. So only a handful of people knew that. So you and him were both killed. You went to the astral world, and he got put into reincarnation. You got put into reincarnation because you were Roman captains under the scourge. Got separated, and in 1883 is where both of you are both basically slave members on an industrial ship, a British industrial ship, where all of a sudden, how do I describe this? An off-world species called Vorak came and basically picked the boat up out of the water, took the whole boat, brought it onto their ship, and then began psychically dissecting everyone that was in there. And they began understanding that both of you have timeline technology built inside your DNA. They didn't understand why. They began doing experiments on you, and your bodies left your soul. Your souls left your bodies, and you all of a sudden died, and you were in the astral world, kicked out of the reincarnation grid, suddenly on the incarnation grid. You know, that you were supposed to be in the reincarnation grid with him for another 100 years. So this species that, you know, screwed up and killed you by accident actually tricked the system to think that you were an incarnating soul and not a reincarnating soul. So this is why you're with him, is because literally some Vorak scientist was screwing around and hit the wrong button and you died.
Wow. Yeah.
Divinity Path Beings. I mean, the truth is stranger than fiction. I'm reading it right out of there, and I mean, I'm laughing at myself. But the system can't figure out a fourth dimensional being's going to hit the wrong button. Fat finger.
That's awesome. That's great.
To these small group of secret societies, and it's always been there. And the only reason they haven't used it like they did, they didn't have the technology. So what do? They have a war, they get all this fast technology going and everything goes boom. So we've got more great big jump in technology. And you get things going on all around the world, you have little jumps in technology. And suddenly they're pouring all this money into all this types of science until they've got to the stage where they can actually produce these things again with the technology, but they had to get it there. And they couldn't make a motor car like they do today in 1930. And now they can make it automatically. They've got everything, nobody in there, they've got people making, machines making cars, putting together. We didn't have that technology. So this is where we're right back to all this knowledge that was in the ancient past is now coming out in our reality, in our future. And they are creating a future for us further on, but only the elite know. Why should they be the only ones that know? We want to know. The public want to know. And the public know that something's going on, but they can't figure out what in the hell is it. Why won't they tell us? Why is there so much chaos? And we don't need wars.
It will make sense. The Edfu building texts, they're one of the most complete sources of events in prehistory, and they declare on the walls of this massive temple, halfway down the Nile, that this beautiful city of knowledge called Heliopolis, which, as I said, is a little part of Cairo today, they claim that Heliopolis was the first primordial mound, and that it was the original navel of the earth that rose from the flood. And that after founding Heliopolis, groups of builder gods set about locating other sacred mounds at carefully chosen locations. And these would act as foundations for future temples, the development of which was intended to bring about the resurrection of the former world of the gods. Seems like they're up to some kind of mischief. I mean that in a very positive sense. So in other words, they wanted to continue an era of enlightenment, and God knows we really could use with it today.
Oh, sorry, old fella. What are you doing here? Oh, this is no place for an old man.
I built it, dullard.
All on your own?
Yes, and for the likes of you, it seems.
Oh, well, then you can tell me the way to the kitchen.
Follow your nose.
The pyramid's whole purpose is to take the energy of friction and vibration in a crustal plate and then convert that energy through vibration into free available consciousness expansion energy to those that live within a certain vicinity of the pyramids. There was a multidimensional being, currently the one that's in charge of all of the Arab countries.
Okay.
Its pieces, parts are all the heads of the Arab families, the so on and so forth, the decision-making people, and the one layer below the decision-making people, and then their banking families. So that's one being. All the wars that exist right now on our planet are meant to suppress the chakra energy that's below it.
Oh.
There are a cluster of womb chakras all throughout the Middle East. called the Garden of Eden at one point in the Bible. What it meant is there could be thousands of local realities within that zone that were all birthing new life that could be transported to a new blank Akashic record planet. It was life that was meant to rapidly be created and then sent somewhere else. What's happening there now is war, so every time someone dies, they're instantly recycled back into the system of war. So you could die once and all of a sudden be forced to be a walk-in on somebody else who's dying.
Ooh, that could get pretty tiring.
And that is what's suppressing the energy of the chakras from waking up. These will be the first sets of chakras that wake up and begin to change the people in that area. And that's why there's war there. And that's why the rebellion started with a fruit vendor, because that was the first opening of the collection of those chakras.
Okay, well, it might interest you to know, ladies and gentlemen, that the human acupuncture meridians and acupuncture points are receptive points for this cosmic energy. And there's acupuncture points on plants, there's acupuncture points on animals, and there's acupuncture points all over the planet. And the largest energy vortexes are right where your major cities are. New York, Los Angeles, almost every major city in the world. London is sitting right on top of what the Hindus call a chakra, which feeds energy into the Earth's acupuncture or meridian system. Okay? Mess with the Earth and you mess with everything it grows, because we're all physically emanations of the Earth. The Earth is our mother. Mess with mama, you mess with yourself. Your acupuncture system does exactly what's going on here in the plant. Everything I've just talked about is in you, completely. Everything. You screw it up, you screw it up. And there's nothing you can do running around to the doctor, cut this, burn this, slash this, cut this, suck this, tuck this. I mean, if you watch television, it's just gnarly what people are doing these days.
Well, the natural waveform, if we just destroy it in discord, we're not living in a world where our body can take it. Our body, actually, the Russians, I've got a book at home, and it's called something, Secrets Behind the Iron Curtain, I think. And when they go into acupuncture, they found that there are 695 major acupuncture points on the body. 695, which is a reciprocal of the speed of light. Now, our body is tuned to these harmonics. Now, if you're going to feed discord into it with what you eat and music and outside influences, you're going to start disrupting your body. You feel ill, you feel sick, and you just don't feel right for some reason. And this is what's happening again. You go back to the young people. That's the world they're living in. And they don't eat right. A lot of people I know, they won't eat veggies, they won't eat anything that's good for them. They'll go into the hamburger bar, and they live on this stuff. And not that it's not good food. You can take some of that type of food, sure, but you can't live on it all the time. You've got to take all the other things and give your body, keep it in tune with reality, and keep it in tune with your environment, and what you listen to. Listen to music that is harmonious and feeds the soul a bit.
Preventing 7 womb chakras from opening up. They have violence and war on them for an extended period of time, with the major exchange for value systems depositing taxed soul energy into those sacred geometry buildings and ancient technologies that have been there since the Atlantean fortification days. So those womb chakras are the ones that are going to open first. They've always known that. Therefore, those are the places that have to have war on the surface to prevent the Earth's unity consciousness reaching out through all of the chakras. So it's like putting a cork in it.
And these navels of the earth are the purest of temples. And the texts go on to claim how the knowledge was safely placed at these navels of the earth, and how the sites mark the effulgent power of a creator God.
New pyramid grids were then brought into these womb chakra areas and built around them in a circle, semicircle, square, or a type of sacred geometry, which would amplify the energy of those womb chakras into consciousness exploring energy for those people that lived around there. In Syria, in Israel, why there's war there all the time is because those consciousness expanding devices are becoming active again. and they need to suppress that. They need to suppress the awakening of the
People
womb
need
chakra.
to dispense with these things. But the problem is, as I've discovered, and which is very much in my message, is that there's also forces out there that know that man is striving to grow and become centered again.
Yeah.
And they are deeply threatened by that force. They know there's an Aquarian age coming on.
Yeah.
They know there's a fifth dimensional transcendence perhaps going to take place. They know that man is straining in this chains. But what does that mean for them and their cults? Well, it's obvious. It's like any corporation. They're going to lose readers, so to speak.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they're going to turn around and there's some chairs are empty.
Yeah.
Because that is deadly. So of course, what do? They come back in and try to shake up the problem, create more trauma to simulate the trauma. So this was done in the 1500s under Gregory the Seventh.
Mm-hmm.
It's been done by several popes. It's been done by several politicians. It's being done today. It's an old formula in which you re-traumatize people in order to get them to fall into line, into groupthink, and into lockstep, you see. And what we're seeing now is, as I always term it, a war on consciousness. What you're seeing in the outer permutations of it, as horrific as it is, and we need to address those horrors, is ultimately a war on consciousness.
So now, when did that begin? So this goes back to the pyramids as well, right?
Well, there's 9 layers of pyramids. Earth has been moved 12 times. Captured 12 times.
Wow.
There are 9 layers of fortifications on the astral world. There's no other planet in the universe, or 3 other universes, that's been fortified that much.
Wow.
So, you're in a situation where the dark guys capture it, fortify it. The light guys recapture it, fortify it, so on and so forth, until finally the fortification grid and the quarantine of the good guys out there is literally the hindrance of what we have, plus the multidimensional beings that are within us manipulating drama and manipulating spiritual contracts so that when unity consciousness comes, they can program their propaganda of thousands of years will come to fruition. We're a race with amnesia, and we're a race held hostage, in a perfect position for entities that want to take the more powerful people and take them somewhere else by their own belief.
Wow.
Well, when the sacred geometry system is cracked at its core, the main communication and control systems, which are 32 obelisks spread throughout sacred geometry buildings, will begin to eat their own energy at a cellular level. Because right now the system has to cannibalize energy, and the energy is stored into the very bricks and the fabric of the sacred geometry system, which is the Masonic bricks, the different secret orders who stamped their bricks during the 1700s, the 1800s, or 1300s or 1200s or whatever, because it was a very long building process to make a sacred geometry system that encompassed the whole world. So those different obelisks will begin to consume their own energy, and those archonic beings that are attached to them will go through their own cannibal process and begin to go into the obelisk and attempt to keep the system of domination and control still in the future. As we begin to awaken and take over the ever-present co-creative moment and banish them to the future and take their anchor away from here, we begin to stop planning our future lives in which they have already planned, and there's a disconnect from the reality bubble, and they are then removed from the reality bubble of our perception and put in their own different reality bubble. And those people who are still left in the system of domination, who have not waked, will be absorbed by the earth dreaming mind, and those final 22 obelisks will become dreaming objects and absorbed into the earth dreaming mind, as well as the other objects or artifacts that enhance CERN on all the different timelines. Those also will be consumed by the Earth's dream time, and the crumbling you see is when the Earth takes her dream matter back from these objects.
Do you remember Yuri Lina had taken photographs of it? I mean, in London, people can go and see it, the main Masonic Lodge. Right above the door is the symbol of the net over the Earth.
That's right.
Just like the United Nations symbols, but exactly in this one, it's a physical net.
I mean, the Irish they connected to the Great Agarthan tunnels under the hill of Tara. That's the master control tunnel that allows you to get to the master system of fortified tunnels that connect different sacred geometry sacred places that are deep under the earth, that are vast majority of them are technology that were built by the Lemurians and Atlanteans many millions of years ago, and each new generation has inherited the legacy of these sacred geometry, local sacred spaces. And there, these tunnels were built specially to get to and from these, so our species, when we were under attack or reality infringement, where something was trying to invade our reality, we could go into these protected tunnels that were their own bubble of reality and travel to the different sacred places and enhance Earth from the reality infringement attack, direct attack, or whatever was going on at that time. And as the society structure broke down and there was no longer a global government or global society, it had broken down to its, the worst of the worst, even though things still had technology. The tunnels began to be fallen out of use. Many were purposely destroyed. But few of the people realized that many of these tunnels are self-regenerating based off of the sentience of Earth. So if Earth is bombed back into the Stone Age and there's only a few 100,000 people alive, the tunnels will collapse upon themselves, and the rest of the species who think that Earth is long since dead, they will leave. And then the tunnels, as more and more mankind gets stronger and stronger and goes back into Neanderthal and then back into some dreamtime spirituality, the tunnels will begin to regrow and certain homing beacons will turn on and mankind will be attracted back to the tunnels. And as soon as mankind reaches into the tunnels again, they all begin to self-direct based off of the quality and quantity of psychic sentience in the human beings that are regrowing from the last destruction. Go ahead. That is our legacy of what's coming up when we start to go back into these tunnels.
Yes.
Well, as it turns out, in every culture there is a recurring association between sacred sites and hotspots of a subtle energy force. And for as long as there have been temples, people have interacted with some kind of force which builds a kind of numinous quality in the individual. And often through a heightened state of perception. And anybody who's been to any temple long enough around the world understands this process. There's something that transforms you, which makes you a totally different person when you come out. And it's proved very beneficial for empowering people, particularly during times of great change, such as those we are now living in. Because there is no doubt that ancient people were able to discern and mark places that are energetically different. And this empowered them to experience direct contact with very subtle realms. And in New Mexico, there is still today a tribe called the Tewa, which venerate a natural temple on a sacred hill, and they call it Sikumu. And it is a place of access to the other world from where their culture allegedly emerged. And these are their words, not mine. And the tribespeople, to this very day, work with something that they describe as Powaha. They describe it as a kind of energy that provides a doorway between worlds. Now, the Aborigines on the other side of the world have exactly the same understanding. They have hotspots, which they describe as increase centers. And the use of correct ritual at these sites will elicit a kind of life force that intensifies the fecundity, not just of people, but also of the land.
But for you, the previous lifetimes you lived here, you were what's called a weather wizard. You lived in the Celtic areas, and you would use the various stone structures to call upon the thunder beings of the planet to bring lightning and thunder and rain, and to use them in many methods, not only for the crops, but for war also. You were managing to take thunder and lightning and turn it into a weapon to save the people for many generations, but ultimately it was lost as a new religion overtook it. And that was the great pain to your soul, one of the reasons you left, because you couldn't use the power of the earth to defend the earth anymore because they had changed the spiritual contracts of this place.
When I left the corporations as an engineer, I moved into the high desert in the United States, a place called New Mexico, Nuevo Mexico, about 3,000 meters above sea level is where my home is. And there are indigenous people, native people in that area in the early 1990s. And it was during this time that this part of our country was experiencing the worst drought in over 100 years. No rain during this time. And a native friend of mine called me one day, and he said, "Greg, would you like to come with me to a place, a very special place, where my ancestors have gone for many, many years to pray rain?" So would you like to come with me to pray rain? Now, I like the language that he used, because he said this place is special because the skin between the worlds is very thin in this place. I like that language. So I met my friend, and we went to this place, and it was a circle of stones, kind of like this. Not this exact place, but very similar to this place. Now, I was not prepared for what I saw, because I believed I would see some dancing, some chanting, some singing, some Native American stuff. And that's not what happened at all. My friend sat down and took off his old shoes. With his naked feet, he stepped into the stone circle. He honored his past. He said the words, "All of my ancestors, all of my ancestors, all of my ancestors are with me now." And then he closed his eyes and he held his hands in a prayer mudra like this. And he turned his back to me for about 20 seconds. And then he looked at me and he said, "I'm hungry. Would you like to go get food?" And I said, "Yes, but I thought you were going to pray for rain." And this is when he looked at me and he said, "No." He said, "If I pray for rain, rain could never happen." He said, because the moment you pray for something, you have just acknowledged it is not here now. If you say, "Dear God, please let there be rain. Please let there be healing in my loved ones. Please let there be peace in the world. Please let my soulmate come into my life." If you say that, what you're acknowledging is that it is not here now. You remember, the divine matrix is very literal. If you say, "Please let," the divine matrix says, "Okay, I will let and let and let," because there is no completion, there is no outcome. Does that make sense? So I asked my friend, his name was David. I asked my friend David, I said, "If you did not pray for rain just now, what did you do when you closed your eyes?" Such a beautiful story. He said, "When I closed my eyes, I felt the feeling as if the rain has already happened." He said, "I felt the feeling of what it feels like to feel my naked feet in the mud in my pueblo because there has been so much rain." He said, "I smelled the smell of what it smells like when the rain falls off of the earthen pueblo walls in our village." And he said, "I felt the feeling of what it feels like when I run through the fields of corn and the corn is so high because there's been so much rain." He said, "And then I gave thanks of gratitude and appreciation for the rain that has already happened." So he didn't ask for the rain. Now this is interesting. When those practitioners worked on the woman with the cancerous tumor, they did not judge the tumor as right, wrong, good, or bad. They accepted it as it was, and they said, "Now we're going to make a new reality. When my friend David prayed rain, he did not judge the drought. He said, this drought is our medicine until now, and now we will create new medicine. This is key. Feeling as if it has already happened. Well, I'll tell you the rest of the story. We had lunch that day. By the time I got back onto my property that afternoon, something began to happen that had not happened for a long time. Big black clouds were coming in from the eastern mountains, and it began to rain that afternoon. And it rained that night. It rained the next morning. It rained into the afternoon. By the evening, it had rained so much and the ground was so dry that it began to flood. The roads were flooded. The crops were flooded. The cattle were stranded. And I called my friend David on the phone and I said, this is a mess. I said, what in the world is going on? And he said, that's the part of the prayer the ancestors could never really explain. It's like they could get the rain to begin, but they didn't know how to tell it how much to rain. Now, I cannot prove to you scientifically that David's prayer made that rain happen. I cannot prove scientifically that those practitioners made the tumor disappear. But we can say there's a high correlation, a very high correlation between when they feel the feelings and when the change happens.
Now, many people aren't aware of it, but the soil has a very, very important electromagnetic relationship with the plants. The sun produces bursts and huge amounts of photons, but the sun's so powerful it can do something that only the sun can do. It can split photons into electromagnetic packets that are diamagnetic and paramagnetic. Diamagnetic means it does not have an affinity to a magnet, or if you take a diamagnetic substance and put a magnet near it, it'll push it away. If you take a paramagnetic substance, and it has an affinity to a magnet, so a magnet will collect it, but it's not magnetizable. Okay? So here you see S, that's your paramagnetic packets, and N is your diamagnetic packets, and it turns out that there are numerous specific types of rocks in the ground that will collect paramagnetic energy. The higher the paramagnetic energy in the soil, the better the plants do. The reason is that the paramagnetic is the equivalent of a positive in an electromagnetic circuit. Diamagnetic, which is your water in your body and your physical tissues, are diamagnetic. So whenever you have rocks in the soil and the microorganisms creating humus stores paramagnetic energy. So when you have a healthy microorganism population and lots of humus, you store paramagnetic energy in the soil. So you need the right rocks and the right soil. And so what happens is the sun, particularly when there's solar flares, blasts these energy packets out. The plant sucks the energy in through the leaves. The soil sucks it in through the root structures and through the microorganisms and the humus structure. Remember I said they act like antennas. This is what they're receiving. And that creates an electromagnetic circuit. So water and plant tissue has a relatively negative charge, okay? And then there's a relatively positive charge in the soil and the rocks. So if you understand basic electromagnetism, you know the Earth is wrapped in an electromagnetic field. You know that, right? You know how, have you seen a picture of the electromagnetic field? Well, an electrical field works in 90 degrees opposition to any magnetic field. So as the magnetic field wraps itself around the Earth, it shoots an electrical potential off. So every plant that absorbs the paramagnetic energy from the sun and from the rocks, which only happens in soils that are properly balanced, produces an electrical current at 90-degree angle to the phase or to the angle of the surface of the Earth, and that's why plants grow up toward the sun. So you understand that? Okay? Now look at this. This is a picture of an Irish round tower, and it might interest you to know that almost all the ancient church steeples and churches Anywhere where there was monks, almost all the buildings the monks built were made out of the exact rocks that were known to be paramagnetic. Isn't that interesting? The monks in almost every religion and in Egypt, all the temples in Egypt are all made of highly paramagnetic rocks. And the research shows they must have had to walk for miles in cases to carry these rocks back. And the reason they did that is because the rocks collect the energy from the sun. That round tower is a giant antenna that sucks cosmic energy from the constellations. So you know, Leo, Virgo, etc., sucks the energy from the stars and the moon and the sun. It stores it and releases it into the ground. And if you study farming and agriculture, you'll find out in Ireland, the best grasses in the country were always right around the monks' round towers. And so the farmers took turns rotating their cattle through, because the cattle that got to eat near the round tower were always the healthiest. Why? Because the electromagnetic energy there was feeding the plants and stimulating the parasite and the microorganisms and producing tremendous amounts of nutrition in the soil, and therefore in the plants, therefore in the animals, and therefore in man. Okay? So, by the way, Eve, the word Eve in Greek, guess what it means? Life force. What's the difference between you and the dead man? Life force. What was Adam? Adam, creature of the earth, just a statue until Eve came along. Adam, yang, male, material, inert. Eve, yin, female, creative womb, life force. Adam and Eve together, you got life. Okay? There you go. That's what the Bible really means. Okay? I know people don't like that, but that's really what it means. Okay? I could give you a 10-hour lecture on that. I'd love to, actually. So what do we have? We have antenna systems, we have energy storage, we have energy conversion, we have energy release, and we have commercial farming. What does commercial farming do? Well, commercial farming mines all the minerals out of the soil, because if you keep stripping the plants out of the soil, the plants take the minerals. If you don't have enough variety in the crops, remember the plants inject minerals back and the nutrition back into the soil, so you rape the soil. When you rape the soil and kill off the microorganisms, you lose all the electrical potential of the soil, and what you have is plants that become addicted to chemical fertilizers, and the parasites attack those plants because they're Mother Nature's garbage, so she sends her garbage collectors after them. So what do? We say, boy, we got a lot of problems with parasites. Let's spray the hell out of them bastards. Kill them all. And the chemical companies think, fantastic, look at all the money we're making. We're making billions, right? And it might interest you to know that in 1945, we only sprayed 200,000 pounds of herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, and rodenticides on the soil in the United States. And by the year 2000, we were up to 2 billion pounds, and crop losses have doubled. Crop losses have doubled. We went from 200,000 pounds a year to 2 billion, and you're eating it, folks, and it's neurogenic, and it's hormonally based. They attack your nervous system and attack your hormonal system, and there's no sense taking a bunch of fancy supplements if you're eating crap food. And it might interest you to know that any of your supplements that are made from the plants, coming in all your greens foods, oh, eat these greens, well, liquefied poison ain't any better than, drugs. I mean, it might look better and smell better, but it's crap. You can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. Unless you're a microorganism. And you're all too big for that. And then if you even could, you got to survive down there.
That they are planning to do the same around Stonehenge, because they're going to build all sorts of factories all around it to try and cut the energy coming from it. And that's the European Union doing all this.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's part of Agenda 21, which is the old sacred geometry system that was built on brick and mortar over many millions of years needs to be fixed, because there's not a proper amount of people that can maintain the sacred geometry magic that's needed to keep it together. So they're switching to a digital format, from cell phone towers to different pieces of road technology that make a whole different type of sacred geometry system that's much more manageable as an infrastructure that requires repair. So when you see the EU do that, it's such Agenda 21, giving them the ability to do that. And Agenda 21 is going to reclaim the last of the sacred sites that weren't claimed before, because there were good people in this world over many thousands of years that made sure many sacred sites were maintained and that they weren't destroyed.
Well, you seem to be, if one carries your position to its logical extreme, it means being willing to look at the grossest, most hellish misery on the planet.
All of it.
And embrace it.
All of it. All of it. You look just directly at, you learn how to keep your heart open in hell. Mm-hmm. You see the horrible beauty of the universe. I remember once I was teaching down at Big Sur at Esalen, and they gave me a house to house sit, and it came with a cat, and the cat and I became buddies, and every day the cat would come in when I was meditating in the morning and bring in its morning breakfast, which was a lizard or something, which was usually still alive, and it would sit down between my legs to eat, to be with me. And I would be sitting there being with God, and I'd hear squeak, squeak, crunch, crunch, and I didn't know who to hate. I mean, I loved the cat, but suddenly the cat was a killer. And I loved the lizard because I identified with the, you know, and I went through all the changes, and I saw it is the phenomena of nature. You've got to be able to look at it all and say, yes, I acknowledge it, without being so busy reacting to it that you don't, because you don't even understand why it is that way. I mean, my ability to see around the edge of the, as Rilke said, the billboard at the edge of town, being able to see just around the edge of the veil, and I can just see a teeny little bit, just like we all can, leads me to understand the game is much farther out than I thought it was. That suffering has, I mean, I can understand the term suffering is grace. I can't live it. I can live it at moments with little sufferings. But I can understand that there is a beautiful unfolding of awareness through suffering. That's what my work with the dying is about.
Yeah.
Now, listen, the Quero make it very clear that we have to behave as though none of this is based in any kind of reality. We shouldn't have an attachment to this happening. We've got to focus on bringing about the changes that we want to see in the physical empirical material realm. And if we do that and we visualize, then the rest will unfold naturally.
But in the new energy, it seems like there will be a large group of people that will seek healing.
Correct.
Just as they're hungry
and
people.
Many of them will get it just through pilgrimages, like here to Mount Shasta.
Okay.
The places of power will begin doing their jobs once again at the highest levels.
The world is no longer at war in the physical world, and if you wish to change the world, you change yourself, and so the world changes. It is from the inside out. You don't do it from the outside. You start with yourself as one step in many, many forward steps.
So the world we're facing today is, in a conclusion, cosmic joke, if I would really look at it the way I'd love to see it, is that we've been programmed to believe that we die and then we go to heaven. My perception is a little different. I think we're born into heaven. And this is where we come to create. This is where we come to have experiences. When we die, we carry those with us, but not the opportunity to make more creations, because this is a virtual reality suit that, as I was saying earlier, when I wasn't spiritual. I had nothing to do with spirituality. I was doing genetics and molecules, all these things. And then I saw the nature of the spirituality, and it was a moment of my whole life changed. And the moment was when I asked myself, when I owned all of a sudden that I have a spiritual part to me and a physical part, and I asked myself, why have both? And the cells answered the question. With a question, I asked, why have both a spirit and a body? And the cells said this to me, Bruce, if you're just a spirit, what does chocolate taste like? And all of a sudden I realized that's a short way of saying all the experiences, the emotions, what you see with your eyes, what you hear with your ears, what you taste with your, what you feel and touch and smell, all of that is derived from this cellular machine that converts the sensations of our world into vibration, and the brain sends the vibration back to source. And I realized biggest mistake of my whole life, because as males, what was the programming? Males were programmed not to be sensitive. Because if we were sensitive, then we were sissies. So we got to the point of how insensitive we can be. Well, hit me and see if I cry. That's the, that was the test. I'm so insensitive, you can hit me. And then, of course, we grew up in a world with all these women with all their sensitivity, because that's allowed. And they look at us going, how come they're so damn insensitive? And it's the programming. And the fact is, I've wasted a lot of my life realizing that our business on this planet is experiential, and to go and be creative, and to manifest experiences you want to carry with you. And the group of the Synergy Foundation, you people all here, are creating experiences in this world, and you're at a level of your experiential creations are capable of influencing a large number of other people, because that's how it's going to spread. As people let go of the programming and move into personal creativity, we all create heaven on earth when we're in love. If we got rid of the program, by then definition, everyone would be manifesting their version of heaven on earth. And I think this is the destination that we're moving into, but the old structure is in a state of collapse with new thinking. And this is what Greg and I emphasized about the new science, the new thinking that shapes the way we live. So we are definitely on the verge of the greatest possible step of human evolution ever, the coming together of a unity called humanity. And the synergy of 7 billion people coming together in the world of science leads to something called emergence. And emergence is things we couldn't even imagine right at this minute. When that many people come together, will pop out of our world. So there's a world that's so far beyond even our imagination at this moment, just looming on the horizon. And as Greg said, all the answers that we need are here, and when this comes together, it will completely turn this planet into heaven on earth, which it rightfully is.